Hello, welcome to the People Place. This is really where we learn from business leaders throughout the Chicagoland area. Many of us learn the best through other people and their stories, their successes, things they would do differently, and lessons learned along the way. I'm Karen Kimsey Swart. I'm with Del Carnegie Chicago. And today joining me is Tenia Davis.
Yes.
Tenia is a seasoned HR leader with decades of experience. Don't you love it? Decades of experience when someone says that. In the entertainment and technology industries. She's built the foundation of her career at HARPO Productions, where she really learned the lasting effects and the lessons a positive culture can impart. She's also continued her career transforming cultures at companies like Johnson Publishing, iManage, and Raise. She's currently serving as Chief Talent and Administrative Services Officer at HBR Consulting. And most recently, which is just a real throw, which we'll find out a little bit more, is she's just completed her Ph.D. focused on servant leadership. As you can tell from her background, she's really passionate about building positive cultures and organizations. Tenia, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to talk with you today, and looking forward to all of your insights and experiences.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So why don't you, let's start with you sharing with us a little bit about your journey. That's always important.
Well, I can't say that I have this huge strategy and roadmap. And it's so funny when I hear people say they have 10 years mapped out. Mine has been really just an evolution. And, we were talking earlier about HARPO, which is a land of itself and had such an awesome journey. The people I worked with were some of the most phenomenal individuals. And, that carried on to Johnson Publishing, to iManage, to Raise, and to currently HBR Consulting. And I say each journey teaches you something. And I always, try to take some nugget with me that I can use in the next role. And I just continue to evolve. I walk in as an open book to learn, not just from about the organization, but also from the folks that are there. And I've had a phenomenal journey, not just at HARPO, but also, those thereafter, and have met some phenomenal folks along the way.
What I loved, because in our conversations, and you were talking about, HARPO, and you were talking about some of the magic. And, I think that's probably one of the early places where you really focused on, building and creating a culture.
Yeah. And a lot, and it's really interesting. I mean, HARPO Land was a place of its own. And the CEO at the time, Tim Bennett, I mean, just an awesome leader and someone that I learned a lot from, and such a calm demeanor and a great listener. And, I would run into the office with all these energy, and it's very calm and very methodical. And, you think back about encounters and meetings and conversations. It's like, wow, that was a great lesson there. And it was many magical moments like that, where I served as HR, but you also supported the organization wherever you were needed. And, that was part of the magic as well, where people just kind of collided in and made things happen. And you work with, and some from, Ivy League pedigree, and some from journeyman, training, and you just converge in this one place to support this huge mission. And you feel compelled, you feel inspired, you feel transformed in many ways, walking in the door maybe with one thought or mindset, and through the different influences, you come out on the other end as a different person. And that is phenomenal, where you have a workplace and you feel you can learn professionally and personally. And that does not happen often.
It does not, does it? Absolutely. When you think about all the different companies, and a lot of your work has been in building healthy cultures, are there any, commonalities, especially right now, I think as business leaders, we're all trying to figure out, right? How do we have these healthy cultures? Because we know that's a key thing for attracting and retaining people. So what advice do you have for people today in this area, and how to what to focus on to build a healthy culture?
The first word that comes to mind is accountability, because without accountability, it's really hard. I mean, if you have some, and I've seen where in an organization, you have some aspects of the business that is very healthy, thriving, and great leadership. Other parts of the organization, polar opposite. And if you don't have that accountability in place to say, this is who we are as an organization, this is how we treat our people, and this is how we lead. And as a representative and agent of the organization, this is the expectation in terms of behaviors. If you don't have that established and someone holding folks accountable for that, then it's really hard to have a consistent thread of culture. And that's how a lot of subcultures are created, where, you know, the genesis starts as one, and then it kind of evolves into something else, and no one is saying, hey, but wait a minute, that's not who we are. And they allow it to continue. And I know we've all seen that picture where, but they're so smart, they're so bright, and they discount the behavior, right? And so a subculture is created. So I say, from my lens, I would say accountability, because you can have all the great buzzwords and great definitions in place and plastered on the wall, but if the organization isn't living that, and if there isn't evidence of that, then it's hard for the organization to believe it.
Right. And it sounds as if you're saying it's accountability at all levels.
At all levels.
Top,
Absolutely.
middle, all the way through.
All the way through. Absolutely.
How do you do that? How do you do that? It sounds good, right? It sounds good, but boy, that's pretty difficult to do.
And it has to be deliberate. You know, it's a deliberate action. It's a deliberate action. It's really interesting. And I know you and I've talked about this before, but when I was doing my research, and there were individuals that were describing these great leaders, and I said, well, what makes them so great? And we kind of got, you know, delayered all of that stuff. And what they were describing is a term that I created this term called cultural perspicacity, right? And basically what they were describing is that the leader, technically, yes, great, awesome. However, in leading them, the leader took time to understand them, understand the nuances, understand the differences, the complexities that existed within the team, and yet took the time to help everyone thrive, right? And so when you do that, you're creating a culture of trust. You're creating a culture of inclusion. You're creating a culture of compassion, empathy. And so when all those things are trickled in, it reinforces what is established.
Yeah,
right?
Too many times people want to bucket people. They want to put them in buckets. Oh, you're a millennial. You know, you're over here, you're over there, yes. Right? And what you're talking about, it's the person. It's looking at the whole person. It's looking at the individual person, and that's hard to do. But it's also one of those necessary things.
Absolutely, intention. You know, it starts with intention and authenticity. And when those two things aren't there, people pick up on it right away. But when they are there, it manifests in such a way that employees or even peers feel like, wow, this is the place I want to be. This is where I want to learn and grow. And this is who we are. This is truly who we are, right? And then your culture thrives and it's helpful. When it's not that, and there's not a check and balance to say, hey, cut that out. That's not who we are. Then then subcultures are created. And then that's, at times, that's where the toxic behavior could start, evolving from there, when those behaviors are counterproductive to what is supposed to exist.
Right. And it's interesting where, recent MIT research was stating that, because so many people are like, oh, it's the Great Resignation. All these people are just going away. They're going away because they just want more money and they just want a job hop. And I found it really interesting. One of the key findings was even more than money. I think it was like 10 times more. It was the toxic culture. Yeah. And that people are leaving because of that. And
isn't that fascinating? It was more interesting is, and it's funny because, I meet with my peers often, almost weekly, because we're comparing notes, sharing, and, and sometimes it's just interesting, especially if the data is saying, well, it's a toxic culture. And then the company's response is, let's have a social. Well, wait a minute, you're not really solving for what people are saying. You're creating a different scenario for something that it's like you're just tone deaf, right? And so I think that's the part, where organizations really have to pay attention to what people are saying. And in that, really solve for the issue itself and not artificial issues. Right. So there's a perception, and then there's the actual actions of what's taking place. And it might not be the entire organization. It just might be a lived and experience, in a particular department. And again, it kind of goes back to, but this leader is just so smart. So you're looking, well, is it about being smart or Or maybe the person's an individual contributor. Maybe they're not a people manager. And it could be different things. And at a staff level, what does that mean? Right. And having that understanding as well. Because I do think sometimes the pressure is just so much on the leader itself that the combination of what takes place, the holistic view of it is not addressed.
Totally agree. And we want, for some reason right now, and maybe it's always been this way, but we want to have the quick fix, the shiny dime, right? Oh, let's go over here and get this shiny dime, get it taken care of, and let's move along to the next thing. Because, with this people stuff, we've got other stuff we have to do, right?
It's always that people stuff.
I know. How about it? Which is where you've lived your career, right? I mean, HR. This is where you've really focused. And if you think about it as an HR leader, because HR has I think you've got a tough job in HR.
Well, it's really interesting. I know early on in my career, every time someone would say HR, people would walk the other way. It's like, oh my God, not HR. And HR was always seen as, did you ever see the Dilbert moments? I mean, that's probably the best way I can describe it. HR was always seen as the evil place, right? Oh my God, I gotta go HR. And it's not the case. But I do think, in some scenarios, the way HR was run, HR would take a position. I support the manager. I raise the banner for the employee. And in doing that, it creates distrust versus let me look for the common ground to truly solve the issue itself, not taking a side, but as an agent of the organization. And let me look how I can reconcile the differences. And I think where HR has the biggest impact in building that resolution is not taking a side. Right. Because you're already working from negative, walking in the door, right? Oh, nobody wants to go talk to HR. Nobody wants to go to HR. And instead of creating, look, this is an open place. This is a place of trust and confidentiality. And if you hold those things in place, operate with those intentions and transparency, then you start building the trust. Once the trust is built, then yes, people see HR through a different lens. Right. And that's sometimes saying to that leader, we could have done this differently. And I think at times HR did not take that posture. And in missing that opportunity, it creates us versus them, or HR only, they're going to do what the manager tells them.
Right. And it's really being it's that trusted, you're being that trusted advisor all the way around.
All the way around.
Speaking the truth.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Understanding other people's perspectives,
correct,
not taking sides.
Exactly. Yeah. And for some folks that's hard. And that, once you start that, right, then you build up the trust and then you're consistent. So someone can disagree with you and they can hate what you said. They're like, oh, I totally disagree with that. But if they know that you're consistent and you're fair, the like and dislike will go away.
Right.
All you care about as an HR is that, was it fair? And am I consistent in how I administer the policies and procedures? And if the policies and procedures make sense for the business, because sometimes there are policies and procedures that just don't make sense.
Right.
And so, recognizing that as well, right? And knowing when to navigate that and also adjust it so that it does make sense. But having conversations on both sides saying, listen, there's this triangle, your side, the other side, and somewhere is the truth. Not that people don't tell the truth, but through our own filters, we're going to experience it and react to it based on that. So it's helping people find that common ground and reconciliation. And then, oh, by the way, we are running a business. And so we can get to the business part and have, a happier interaction.
See, and I love it that you bring the business part, because that's obviously that's a key part.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the people in the business together, and it's not separate. So it's not like HR, the people, it's over here. And it's also making those decisions that really tie in the best for the business too, and having people see that it's all different sides.
Exactly. Another way to look at it too is, we all come from different parts of the world and backgrounds. Well, when you come into the workplace, it's not checked out the door. I mean, that's just impossible, right? You tend to bring it in with you. And so if you have this convergence of all these differences, then what do you do with it, right? And that's why I think leadership today, it's a different skill than than yesterday, because you artfully, you're navigating the work itself to get it out the door, but you're also navigating how to get folks to work together, right, in a productive way.
Yes, and you brought up a good point, because so many of us as leaders, we're trying to focus on how do we build inclusive environments, because actually part of a toxic environment is when you're not inclusive. There are a lot of other different components, but one is the inclusive, having people feel like they can belong somewhere. And I think that's such a key part. So if they don't feel like they're included, or they're just kind of put in a bucket,
yes,
that's then where you have less engaged people.
Yeah.
You have people that want to, actually, they're not as productive, and they leave. So that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. And that starts with having the intention and the authenticity. Most folks know if you are sincere or not, right? And if people want to feel they belong, they want to feel included. And if they're giving, if it's lip service, they're going to know that too. So I always start with the intention, whatever the intentions are, in authenticity and transparency, and build from there. Most people know if a company is sincere or not. And when someone is looking at if they connect in, or if the company, has a belonging or inclusive environment, it's the optics, what's around, right? Does anyone look like me? Does anyone talk like me? They look at the website, they look at all the different media outlets where the organization lives, and they determine if that's a place where they can connect in. And it's one thing to say, hey, we invite everybody. But then when they get there, if no one speaks to them, or if no one says hello, or hey, would you like to go to lunch? It's saying one thing and doing another, right? And so I do think it's important to live the words. And if the organization really doesn't know what that means, they need to find out what that means for them, because people are wanting that authenticity. And if they feel that's not there, then yes, they will leave.
It's so interesting. Yeah, because several companies that I've been working with, they focus so much on the attracting piece, because they really do. They have the intentions. They want to have an inclusive and diverse workforce, and they work on all these recruiting and the website and what they're saying, and all the different components on the upfront. Then people get in, and then they're like, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't this isn't what I thought. And so then they leave. They become disenchanted pretty quickly. So some of the advice has been, work on your culture, right? We know you want to
and don't feel you have all the answers.
And
don't feel, there was a situation that I know of, these individuals felt that they know it. They don't need to go to training. They don't, hey, what do you mean? I don't need that stuff. And then they were in a conversation with a coworker, and the coworker was sharing that, their kid was doing something great. And they said, oh, do they play sports? And the coworker was just like, so taken back. Like, why would you automatically equate that that's the only avenue my child, and of course they gravitate towards it must because of, and that's where the different dynamics come in. Well, they must have said it because of this, and it might not have been the intention. Right. However, again, and so there are things in many, different, having that understanding of all differences, right, in all backgrounds. And yes, it is a more complex workplace, and I think that if we don't pay attention to that and build some sort of understanding, people will just check out. Right. Because they don't feel they fit. So having the different, and someone said to me once, this is far more complex than when I joined organizations a long time ago, and it is more complex because people are saying, enough, I don't want to show up as 80% of myself. So if my coworkers are able to show up at 100%, and I'm only accepted of that, they only like 80% of me. That other 20% is unknown, and they don't want to get to know that 20%. Then how can I show up as my best if I only can bring 80% of myself to the table, right? And if you're sitting at a table where everybody else is at 100%, then you're trying to figure out how to navigate that, right? And so instead, if we create space and say, okay, everybody bring 100%, and I want to understand what that 100% is, and as a leader, I want to mobilize that so I can build productivity, then yes, it does require us to intentionally approach it differently and authentically gain the understanding of the teams that we're leading.
Absolutely. And then also recognizing too, when you talk about even the 80%, I think about sometimes, and we've had conversations about this where sometimes people, there's an 80%, even as far as like an effort piece.
Yes.
Where someone, because, we've had so much over the past couple of years with, if you think about mental health, well, we've all been struggling. I mean, I think about just the young, I could go, the mothers, every category, all of us have had some type of a stress, personally and professionally. And I think as leaders, making sure that first of all, that we take care of ourselves, because, we're not exempt from it.
Right.
And how do we take care of ourselves? And then how do we, if someone is struggling and they are a high performer, that they don't feel like they're just discarded because at the moment they're not at 100%, they might be at 80%, and recognizing that. What are any advice you have for that or thoughts on that?
And I think, and I see it a lot too, organizations are really tapping into the different offerings of their benefit carriers. And I see the benefit carriers really stepping up in this area by providing resources for organizations to share with their employees. But I think the most important thing, because to get into chapter and verse, that's not always the best place to be in, but if the organization can provide resources for the employees and the leaders, have empathy around that, that goes a long way. And at the end of the day, I always start with benefit of the doubt first. I don't believe that people are wanting to take advantage or anything like that. Things happen. And based on this new work style, is happening more and is manifested differently. So I think where organizations are supportive, and some organizations I've seen, they half-day Fridays, or no Zoom on Wednesdays, or it might be, the benefits carrier offers this around wellness. We're encouraging everyone to have a wellness day. I know a lot of organizations are moving towards that. And so I think depending on the organization, there are just different things. I don't think it's a cookie cutter, but I think having offerings for the demographics that the business has, where employees can access it, and that the leaders truly honor that time for employees to take, that's very important. So it's one thing to say, we have half-day Fridays, but by the way, you have these 7 things to do. I mean, that's not, I'm
going to send you lots of emails while you're off.
I know, right?
Doesn't that drive you crazy?
That is you're right. I mean, that's banana. So, I mean, that defeats the purpose. So, truly honoring that time, and everyone needs a reboot. Everyone needs a reboot. And if you're not taking it, yes, you will at some point crash and burn. I mean, we're just not built to move full throttle like that.
Right.
And you do want to refresh, and you want to have a healthy team. And I know some groups, they alternate, or I know a lot, I'm hearing more and more, and I'm sure you're hearing it too, about the 10-hour work days. And so I think we're organically figuring out how to do this differently, maintain balance and healthiness, mental health, and around this. And it will take a different approach.
No, definitely. And when I even think, a couple of thoughts on that. I think first would be, we as leaders need to model it. I mean, I had to, with all of this, I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep myself in check. I've got to make sure I'm healthy, because I think as leaders, if we're not showing up at our best selves, okay, even at an 80% day, we need to somehow, we need to make sure we're doing things, and that we're modeling it and taking care of ourselves for our mental health. I think that's,
there were quite a few folks who said, I have Zoom fatigue. I said, turn the camera off.
Yep.
Turn the camera off. I mean, I don't need to see you to hear you. So
exactly.
And so it's just finding that balance. Yes, the leaders have to model it. Absolutely.
And and it seems like if you would call a lightning rod conversation, still to this day, it's hybrid workforce.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my gosh. The amount of companies that are trying to figure this out, that have gone on, we're not going to go hybrid, or virtual, we're going to be all in the office, and then they keep backing off. And then the ones that are saying we're 100% virtual, I think everyone's just trying to figure this out and what's best for them. So I think, again, we're at all these different changing times, and trying to figure it out, trying to be flexible. And it's just
we have to do it quickly. There's this new market. Well, it's not a new market, but we have this emergence of the gig market now. Well, the gig market is completely remote.
Yes,
they work all over the world, right? And so, that's another complexity in it, because it's already proven that it works. However, that, and I'm in the office today, there is something about the human interaction, right? So I do know organizations are taking once a week where they come into the office or they meet somewhere downtown, but it's more around, just connecting in, right? And
Yes.
that helps too with wellness as well, having that interaction and still keeping those rapport. And then you have new people joining the team. Just think about those people that join new companies during COVID, no interaction at all,
Right.
And so how do you go back and rebuild that? So I do think it's important to build the human connection and the interactions. I do think there could be a balance of it. But that, it strengthens communication, which has to be more deliberate, intentional. It also strengthens the ability to connect in with people more and really understand. And that's where I think empathy and compassion comes in, because everybody, approaches things differently. But understanding the teams that you lead is very important.
Absolutely. So I want to find out a little bit more. I should have touched on this earlier, and I thought I've got to come back to it. And it's servant leadership.
Yeah.
And the fact that you got your PhD in it, and what led you to it, and anything that you talked a little bit about it, but are there any just ahas or along the way when you were studying it, just any insights you'd like to share with us?
Well, I'm a fan of servant leadership. And when I worked at HARPO, Tim Bennett, who was the CEO, he's just a phenomenal person. And it was interesting because I originally was writing a paper about transformational leaders and things like that. And servant leadership was a part of it. And there was another article, a journal article about a leader. I said, oh my God, that's just like Tim. And it really, I started thinking, how do we build more leaders of servant leadership characteristics? How do we build these leaders? How do we develop these leaders? How does one evolve? And what, so I just had all these questions around that. And, I found a lot of aha moments. One was the cultural perspicacity that came out of that. And then it was someone that I interviewed kept using the term friendship accelerator. And I thought that was just an interesting term. And she said, yeah, it's basically where you develop the relationship authentically, quickly, so you can get to the work, because the work at this particular organization was around trust. And so to get to the trust, you had to get to know the person. And so she said, yeah, we would just go through this whole friendship accelerator authentically. And I said, well, what is that? And they said, well, that's where you literally really get to know the person. They see you as a human being. And I thought that was just very interesting, because typically in organizations, that period of adjusting, fitting in is a very slow churn. And so when organizations move through that quicker, they're able to get to the work faster. So that was something that I thought was really interesting, how this particular organization was able to navigate that. And that was part of their culture. And then the cultural perspicacity, just in terms of the leadership style and how they engaged a very diverse workforce and was able to mobilize and build credibility. And there was a lot of, these leaders, and that's all they talked about, was how they led professionally and personally. And to your earlier point, they were definitely leading by example. Mm-hmm. So a lot around that. I'm very passionate about it. I developed an app, and I have an app that's testing now in Apple and testing in Android. And the app is called Leadership Wise, WISE, Leadership Wise. And it's all about, if I want to be a servant leader, how do I do that? And so in the app, there's a self-assessment, and then there are some tips on, things that one could do to start developing those skills, because a lot of organizations are not, investing that way, which I think they should, because the generation in the workplace today, they want to be led differently. And if we don't understand that in the workplace today, we're going to really miss out. We're really going to miss on a lot of talent.
Right.
But we do need to lead differently. And I do think, there is something that there's strength in servant leadership. And some people say, oh, it's such a soft term. And it's really not. It has a lot of strength in it, because to lead in that manner, especially authentically, and have the intention and transparency and the ability just to be open to mobilize a group and coach and mentor them. Those are different skills that most leaders do not have. So yeah, I can talk about this all day, but
No,
yeah.
I love it. I love it. And the coaching and mentoring, you're right. Because if you think about, the people entering the workforce now and that have been for the past like 10 years. And then I think about the void, even the past 2 years, I think
Yes.
they've had a little bit of a void because we've all just been trying to figure out if we're working at home or not, or we're open or not, or we're in a mask or
Right.
not, or right. Think about all the things,
Yes. Yeah.
right? So it's making sure now let's make sure that we get, become refocused for those of us that haven't, and try to figure out you're right. It's not a top down management. It
Right.
really is about the coaching and the mentoring and how you can bring them along. I mean,
and the teacher can be the student, and that's
yes,
okay. It's so funny to me. I hear leaders say all the time, "Oh, well, I'm the professor, I'm the teacher," but no, you're not, because there's a lot that you can learn. And where I've seen the strongest partnerships develop is when that leader recognizes, well, you know what, this person brings this superpower to the team, and this will help me lead better. And so when the leader recognizes that and knows how to embrace it and engage it, they have a better experience as well, right? And so yeah, it's really interesting. And most folks coming into the workplace today, they don't like the labels. We talked about that.
yes.
But it is important that they feel they can contribute. And so if the contributions are only, well, you're only the student, at some point they will disengage, because they do it. I mean, there's a lot to offer on both sides, right?
It's like a collective lifelong learning.
Yeah.
I think that you key there. And you're right. Okay, none of us like labels, right? I was mentioning that to you. My name's Karen. I don't like the Karen label. Wait a minute, right? I don't.
Right.
I don't know why we all feel like we've got to bucket everybody.
No, we don't. And the new generation coming into the workforce, they hate the buckets. They say we're this, they hate it. They just want. It's very simple. They just want the opportunity to learn and to grow. Yes. They want mentorship, right? And that's simple. They want balance. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Most of them have seen their parents work hard and companies let them go, so their sense of loyalty is different. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think we have a great opportunity to mobilize a workforce for the next 10 years, but it would just have to be differently. It would have to be differently.
Yeah. One of the words I keep hearing is connected.
Yeah.
That's the piece when you talked about the relationship accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
That's a key piece to it's the intentional connecting, because I think so many companies have thought, well, that's over there. That'll be later. Right. Let's figure out, let's get to know our jobs and everything. And I think a lot of companies are changing that. And a lot of leaders are changing how they're thinking about that, because they're realizing those are some real key things to actually.
And they're very vocal, right?
Yes.
I mean, they're very vocal, Karen. And it's so funny. I asked a group, I said, well, what is it that you want to learn? And the manager said, oh, they just want a social. And they're like, no, we want a project management class. And I thought, wow, how disconnected, how can you miss out? So it's very simple, because they're very vocal, which is good. So they're telling us what is needed, how they want to learn, how they want to grow. And I think with the seasoned, I like to say seasoned,
yes.
with the seasoned professionals that are in the workplace, I think we have an awesome opportunity to mold and develop and grow the next generation of leaders. And that's what excites me. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm going to leave with this one last question. What, just any advice you would give to someone who wants to work their way up in a leadership role? Mm-hmm. To me, it's anyone. We're just going to put it, anyone who's saying, I want to be a leader today. What are some advice? What advice would you give to them?
Yeah. So really understand the business. And, I say this I really understand the business, because typically, and as you know, people will say, well, how can I help you? Or what is it that you want to do? And if you don't have an answer for that, especially for folks that really maximize their time, they're trying to figure out, well, I need to do 1, 2, 3 to help this person. So understand the business and where you might want to go. If you're unsure, at least understand the landscape of the business. 2, mentorship is so important in the organization. Identify someone to be a mentor to kind of help you understand there are written rules and unwritten rules that we all know about, right? And so that also helps a person to have the journey through the leadership tiers, understand what those leadership tiers are. What do you need to acquire in terms of learning to fit into those roles? What do you need to learn? And then how is that measured? Make sure you understand how that's measured so that as you are moving through, you know how you will be evaluated. And then always ask for feedback. Ask for feedback. And if there are projects you can work on to kind of stretch your skills out so that it can get you where you want to go, that's very important as well. It's easy to say, hey, I want to move over here to director. But if you're not gaining the experience or have the exposure to get to that role, then it will take a little longer. And I think the key is always ask for feedback along the way. I see a lot of leaders with blinds, but not having that self-awareness, you miss out on a lot of opportunities. And when you get the feedback, don't debate the feedback.
I was going to say that.
Don't debate the feedback, but take it in and
Yes.
really think about it. Okay, how can I do this differently? Because where I see the most success is for when people have self-awareness and they make the corrections along the way. And leaders recognize that. And that says, wow, that person, they learn, but they also have the self-awareness, which means they can move a lot faster.
Yes.
And then I would say, adaptability. Always be, adapt, understand the lay of the land. Don't feel you have to go in knowing all the answers, but pay attention to the landscape. But when you're going there, and as you continue to move, the lessons you learn, share that with someone else. And I think that's the bigger picture, is where as you learn, share that with someone else so that they can too, so they too can grow. And when you build a strong team like that, you can move anywhere in the organization. The strongest leaders I've seen are those that have built leadership below them that allows them to move anywhere in the organization because they have a pipeline ready.
Yes.
So never be afraid to share what you know, because you're asking someone else to share what they know.
I love it. Definitely builds the culture of trust, which you mentioned. So
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful insights. It was just a pleasure talking with you. And talk about your app again. Just give the name of your app again, once again.
So Leadership Wise, it will launch mid-June.
Okay.
So as it will launch in mid-June. It's called Leadership Wise. And it's a gamified way of learning servant leadership. So,
great. And for all levels, I'm sure, because I know I continue to learn every single day.
Yes. So it's a fun way to learn servant leadership. And I'm hoping people really, and please give me feedback too, but it was a passion of mine that was kind of birthed out of my dissertation process. And there are so many people that want to lead differently and just want some sort of tool around that. And I thought, what a fun way to kind of gamify it so that people can just kind of, touch in and learn and have a little fun along the way too.
Sounds great. Well, good. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for spending time with us.
Thank you.
And we look forward to more conversations and trying out your app. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks.